The napkin was white, hospital white, the kind of white that shows every stain, every imperfection, every drop of blood. And there was blood. Two words written in shaky letters, written by a child's finger, written because speaking had become too dangerous and silence had become death. Help me. Garrett Cole looked at those words and felt something shift in his chest, something he hadn't felt in 8 years. Not since the night the hospital called. Not since Sophie's small hand went cold in his. Not since he buried his 7-year-old daughter and promised himself he'd never feel that helpless again. He was about to break that promise. The diner smelled like coffee and bacon grease and something else Garrett couldn't name. Something wrong. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting that particular shade of institutional yellow that made everyone look sick. Maple Street Diner, Madison, Wisconsin, Christmas Eve, 11:47 at night. Garrett had come here for eggs and solitude, an hour of peace before his midnight shift started at the fire department. 18 years as a paramedic, 18 years of saving people. And before that, 11 years as a combat medic, 29 years of keeping people alive. But he couldn't save Sophie. The boy stood 3 feet from Garrett's booth, small for 10 years old, thin in a way that suggested months of hunger, not genetics. His clothes hung loose, gray hoodie that swallowed his frame, jeans with frayed cuffs, sneakers held together with duct tape. His hand trembled as he held it out, palm up, blood dripping from his index finger onto the white tile floor. Drip, 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 each drop landing with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Garrett set his book down carefully, slowly. The way you move around spooked animals or trauma victims. And this kid was definitely traumatized. Garrett had seen enough broken children in Afghanistan to recognize the signs. The haunted eyes, the way he held his body like he was trying to take up as little space as possible, the flinch reflex that came from expecting violence. The other hand held the napkin, the white napkin with 2 words written in blood. Garrett's eyes flicked past the boy to the back of the diner, booth near the bathroom, middle-aged couple, well-dressed, clean, the kind of people who looked respectable. The woman had gray-streaked brown hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a cardigan that probably came from Talbot's or some other store that sold respectability by the yard. The man wore khakis and a polo shirt, reading glasses perched on his nose as he looked at his phone. They looked normal. They looked safe. Garrett had learned a long time ago that monsters rarely look like monsters. He stood slowly, 6'1", broad-shouldered from years of physical work and riding motorcycles. His left hand was missing the ring and pinky fingers. Lost them in an industrial accident 24 years ago, back when he was young and stupid and didn't understand that a second of carelessness could cost you pieces of yourself you'd never get back. He dropped to one knee, eye level with the boy. "You're safe now, son," Garrett said. His voice was low, calm, the voice he'd used with wounded soldiers, with dying children in bombed-out villages, with his daughter during her last days. "I promise." The boy's eyes flicked toward the couple in the back booth, his whole body tensed, ready to run, ready to fight, ready to do whatever he had to do to survive. Garrett held out his left hand, the damaged one. "See, this means I know what pain looks like. Means I know how to help." He reached forward carefully, telegraphing every movement, placed his right hand on the boy's shoulder. Gentle, steady, grounding. "What's your name, Tyler?" The word came out like a confession, like saying his own name was dangerous. "Tyler Morgan." "How old are you, Tyler?" 10. Garrett pulled a napkin from the chrome dispenser on the table, pressed it gently to Tyler's bleeding finger. The kid had bitten it until it bled, bit through his own cuticle to make himself bleed so he could write those 2 words. That level of desperation, that level of courage. Garrett had seen soldiers with less guts. "Tell me what's happening," Garrett said quietly. "All of it. Start from the beginning." Tyler's voice shook but didn't break. "There's 8 of us, all foster kids. They keep us locked in the basement. We're not allowed upstairs except for church once a month, and even then we have to smile and say we're blessed." Garrett felt something cold settle in his chest, the kind of cold that came before action, before decisions that couldn't be undone. "How long?" 10 months. Since my mom died, since I went into foster care, Tyler's hazel eyes were ancient, old in a way no 10-year-old should be. It was okay at first, normal house, normal rules, regular meals. But after 2 months, they moved us to the basement, said it was temporary while they renovated our rooms, except our rooms never got renovated. We just stayed down there, and it got worse. Worse how, Mom? We barely eat. I used to weigh 71 pounds before I came to live with them. Now I weigh 52. Tyler's voice dropped to a whisper. They keep us weak, so we won't fight, so we can't run, but healthy enough that we pass the doctor visits. Garrett's jaw tightened. His hands wanted to make fists, wanted to walk over to that respectable-looking couple and show them what real violence looked like. But that wasn't what Tyler needed. Tyler needed strategy, evidence, a plan that would actually stick. Garrett had buried one child. He would not fail another. Have you told anyone, teachers, doctors? 3 times. Cause? Tyler's voice went hollow, empty. The voice of someone who'd learned that hope was a luxury he couldn't afford. I tried to tell my teacher, Mrs. Romano, when I still went to school. She filed a report with CPS. A caseworker came to the house. But Karen showed them a fake bedroom upstairs that we never use. They closed the case in 2 days. Then Karen pulled me out of school for homeschooling. But we don't do any schoolwork. We just sit in the basement. What about the second time? Our neighbor heard us crying at night. She called the police. 2 officers came. But Karen said we'd been watching a scary movie and got upset. The officers never even asked to see us. They just left. And the third time, doctor's appointment. 6 months ago, required by the state, but Karen stayed in the room the whole time. I tried to tell the doctor I was hungry, that we weren't being fed enough. Karen said I was a picky eater with trauma from my mom's death. Tyler looked up at Garrett with those ancient eyes. The doctor believed her. They always believe her. 3 attempts, 3 failures. A child screaming for help in every way he knew how, and the system just kept failing him. Garrett angled his body between Tyler and the couple in the back booth, a human shield. Then he asked the question that would change everything. Tyler, you said you have proof. The boy reached into his hoodie pocket, pulled out an old smartphone. Screen cracked, case held together with duct tape. The kind of phone someone threw away 5 years ago. I found this in the basement. It belonged to a foster kid who was there before me. Karen and David never found it when they cleaned out his stuff. Tyler's hands shook as he unlocked the phone. I charged it using an outlet behind the water heater, and I recorded them talking. They didn't know I could hear them through the heating vent. He pulled up an audio file. November 19th, 10:47 p.m., 4 minutes and 37 seconds long. Garrett hit play. Volume low enough that only he and Tyler could hear. The voices were tinny, distant, but clear enough. Male voice, mid-40s, Midwestern accent. We've had the full 8 for almost 2 years now. As long as we pass the December inspection, we're clear for another 220,000 next year. Female voice, slightly higher pitch. Matter of fact, less like she was discussing grocery shopping instead of child exploitation. I did the math. Even with the new car payment, we're still clearing 185,000 profit. Best decision we ever made was scaling up to 8. The more you take, the more you make. And nobody checks that closely. Male voice again. The key is keeping them weak enough that they won't fight, but healthy enough that they pass the basic exam. That's the sweet spot between compliance and visibility. Garrett stopped the recording. He'd heard enough, more than enough. For 3 seconds, he sat perfectly still. Habit from years of tactical training, processing, strategizing, calculating his next move. 29 years keeping people alive. 8 years carrying the weight of the one person he couldn't save. 18 years riding with the Hells Angels, learning what brotherhood really meant. All of it had been preparation for this moment. Garrett stood, shrugged off his leather vest, the one with the Hells Angels Wisconsin chapter patch, the one he'd earned after 18 years of brotherhood and blood, the one that said he belonged to something bigger than himself. He draped it over Tyler's shoulders. The leather swallowed the boy's thin frame. But the weight of it, the presence of it, seemed to make Tyler stand a little straighter. You see this patch, Garrett said, means you're under club protection now. Means anyone who wants to hurt you has to go through all of us. And son, we number in the hundreds. Tyler looked up at him. Something shifted in those exhausted hazel eyes. Not hope. Not yet. But maybe the ghost of a possibility that hope could exist. You're never going back to that house, Garrett said. Whatever happens next, you're done being hurt. That's my promise to you. He pulled out his phone. 2 calls to make. The first one was protocol. He was a mandated reporter, legally required to call when he witnessed child abuse. 18 years as a paramedic. He knew the law. He knew his duty. First call, 911. What's your emergency? Garrett's voice was calm, professional. The voice of someone who'd made 1,000 emergency calls. This is Garrett Cole, paramedic with Madison Fire Department. I'm at Maple Street Diner, 847 East Johnson Street. I have a 10-year-old foster child with evidence of severe neglect and abuse. I'm looking at visible injuries, malnutrition, and I have a recording that documents criminal intent by his foster parents. They're in the building right now. Officers are being dispatched. Stay on the line. They get here in 3 minutes or I'm handling this myself. Child is in immediate danger. Garrett ended the call. The second call was different. The second call was brotherhood. He pulled up a contact. Ethan Cole, his older brother, club president, the man who'd raised him after their parents died, the man who'd taught him what loyalty meant, what family meant, what showing up for people meant even when it was hard. One ring. Priest, it's Reaper. Ethan's voice was warm, relaxed. Christmas Eve at home. Garrett, Merry Christmas Eve, brother. You working tonight? I need every brother within 50 miles at Maple Street Diner on East Johnson, now. A pause. Garrett could picture Ethan straightening in his chair. That lawyer brain already spinning into tactical mode. Former Army chaplain. Passed the Wisconsin bar in 1994. Chose brotherhood over courtroom, but never lost the strategic mind. What's going on? 10-year-old foster kid just handed me evidence of 10 months of abuse and financial exploitation. 8 children total, all trapped in a basement. Foster parents are here in the diner right now, and I've got about 90 seconds before they realize their victim is talking to me. Garrett's voice was steady, cold, the voice of a man who'd made his decision. We're not waiting for the system to take their time on this one. Say no more, we're coming. The line went dead. That was it. No questions about proof or evidence. No concerns about legal complications. Just instant commitment. Because that's what brotherhood meant. Showing up when a child needed protection and the system had already failed 3 times. Garrett looked down at Tyler. The boy was clutching the leather vest like a life raft, like armor, like the only thing keeping him from drowning. How many brothers? Tyler whispered. Garrett checked his watch. 11:52 p.m. By 2 a.m. I'd guess 200, maybe more. It's Christmas Eve, so most of them are local, probably at home or at the clubhouse. And every single one of them is about to drop whatever they're doing to make sure you and those 7 other kids are safe by sunrise. Why? It was a fair question. Garrett had known this child for less than 5 minutes. Most people would walk away. Most people had walked away. Tyler had just told him about 3 failed attempts to get help, about a neighbor who heard crying and did nothing after 1 police visit, about a teacher whose report got buried, about a doctor who chose convenience over truth. Garrett dropped to one knee again, eye level with Tyler. 8 years ago, I lost my daughter to leukemia. Sophie was 7 years old, and I couldn't save her. I spent every day of her illness trying, and I failed. His voice roughed with emotion he thought he'd buried. But you walked up to a stranger in a diner bleeding and terrified and asked for help. You were brave enough to record evidence, brave enough to keep that phone hidden for weeks, brave enough to approach the scariest looking man in this room because you had no one else left to ask. He squeezed Tyler's shoulder gently. So here's why. Because I couldn't save Sophie, but I can save you. Because I was just following protocol, is what people say when they're too afraid to do what's right. And because no child should ever have to be that brave alone. In the back booth, the woman who'd identified herself on the recording as Karen was watching them now. Her eyes narrowed, calculating, trying to decide if this was a problem. Garrett stared back. Let her see exactly what she was dealing with. A man with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The next 15 minutes moved fast. Patrol car pulled up outside, lights flashing, two officers, Daniels and Kim. The same two who'd responded to the neighbor's call 11 months ago and left without checking the basement. Garrett recognized them from Tyler's description. The ones who'd chosen convenience over truth. The ones who'd failed this child once already. They wouldn't get a second chance to fail him. Officer Daniels was mid-30s, clean cut, looked like he'd been told his whole life that following procedure was the same as doing right. Officer Kim was older, maybe 45, salt and pepper hair, eyes that had seen things but chosen not to see too much. They walked through the diner door and their hands instinctively moved to their belts, not toward weapons, just the unconscious body language of men entering a situation they didn't understand yet. Officers, Garrett said, voice calm, professional. Garrett Cole, paramedic with Madison Fire Department. I have a foster child here reporting severe abuse and neglect. I have a recording documenting financial exploitation and criminal intent. The alleged perpetrators are Karen and David Brooks, currently seated in the back booth. Officer Daniels looked at Tyler, really looked at him for the first time. The oversized hoodie, the bleeding finger, the way the kid flinched when David Brooks stood up to see what was taking so long. We've been to that address before, Officer Kim said slowly. Recognition dawning. Welfare check about a year ago. Everything seemed fine. Everything was not fine, Garrett said, and this child has proof. That's when Karen Brooks made her move. She stood, moved her cardigan, put on that smile, the one that said she was a good person doing noble work. The one that had fooled teachers and doctors and social workers and police officers. The one that had kept 8 children invisible for 10 months. She walked over like she was greeting old friends at church. Officers, Tyler, honey, what's going on? You've been gone from the table for so long. We were getting worried. Her voice was pure sugar. Concerned mother, blessed caregiver. The mask fit perfectly. Ma'am, Officer Daniels said, we're going to need you to wait over there while we talk to Tyler. Karen's smile flickered. Just for a second. I don't understand. Tyler is our foster son. We have every right to... Ma'am, please step back. That's when the sound started. Low at first, distant, like thunder rolling in from the horizon. Then louder. Motorcycles. Dozens of them. By the time Karen Brooks turned toward the diner's front window, the parking lot was filling with Harley Davidsons, row after row, chrome gleaming under the streetlights, leather-clad riders dismounting in coordinated waves. Garrett checked his watch. 12:11 a.m., 19 minutes since his call to Ethan. 67 brothers had just arrived, and they were just the first wave. The diner went silent except for the rumble of engines cutting off one by one. 67 Harley Davidsons parked in perfect formation across the lots and along East Johnson Street. The riders dismounted with synchronized efficiency. Men and women in black leather vests, all bearing the same patch, all moving like they'd done this 1,000 times before. Because they had. Most people look at bikers and see stereotypes. Outlaws, criminals, men who reject society's rules because they're too weak or too stupid to follow them. What walked through that diner door was something else entirely. Ethan Priest Cole entered first, 58 years old, gray beard down to his chest, wearing reading glasses that made him look more like a professor than a biker, which made sense. He'd passed the Wisconsin bar in 1994, spent 2 years as an Army chaplain before that, could argue constitutional law as easily as he could rebuild a carburetor. Behind him, 4 others, each chosen for a specific role. Hammer Thompson, 52, ex-homicide detective from Milwaukee PD, 26 years on the force before he retired with full pension and joined his brother's club. He knew every legal procedure, every admissible evidence rule, every way to make sure a case stuck. Doc Vaughn, 47, trauma nurse at UW Hospital for 19 years. The only female officer in the chapter and the one everyone wanted around when things went medical. She was already assessing Tyler with trained eyes. Noting the weight loss, the bleeding finger, the rope burns visible when his sleeves rode up. Tracker Park, 39. former social worker turned bike mechanic. He'd spent 11 years in the foster system, both as a kid who'd survived it and as a caseworker who tried to fix it from inside. He understood how these operations worked, how they hid, how they justified themselves in paperwork that looked legitimate until you knew what questions to ask. Wire Brennan, 34, IT security specialist who ran penetration testing for banks during the day and handled all digital evidence for the club at night. He'd already pulled out his laptop, already connected to a mobile hotspot, already preparing to document everything that was about to unfold. Garrett met them near Tyler, who was still wearing the leather vest, still gripping it like armor. "Brother," Ethan said quietly, his voice carrying that pastoral calm that made people instinctively trust him. "Tell me what we've got." Garrett handed him the phone with the recording. Tyler Morgan, age 10, foster care placement with Karen and David Brooks for 10 months. 8 children total in the home, all kept in the basement. I've got a 4.5-minute recording of the Brooks discussing financial motive. 220,000 annual profit from foster care stipends. Child presents with visible malnutrition injuries consistent with restraint. Incredible testimony of 3 failed intervention attempts by authorities. Ethan listened to 30 seconds of the recording. "That's all it took." He looked at Hammer, who nodded once. "That's felony child abuse, child endangerment fraud, and about 6 other charges I can think of off the top of my head. Recording is admissible. Wisconsin is a one-party consent state, and Tyler had reasonable expectation that he was being threatened. Plus, he's a minor in immediate danger. This is solid." Officer Daniels was still standing near Karen Brooks, looking embarrassingly uncomfortable as more bikers filed into the diner. Not aggressive, not shouting, just present, taking up space, bearing witness. "Sir," Daniels said to Ethan, "this is an active police investigation. I'm going to need your people to learn." "My people," Ethan interrupted gently, "are witnesses. We're citizens exercising our First Amendment right to observe law enforcement activity in a public space. We're not interfering, we're documenting." Wire held up his laptop, recording everything, audio, video, timestamps, full chain of custody documentation for any evidence we observe. All completely legal. Tracker stepped forward, pulling out a folder that seemed to materialize from nowhere. "I've also got Tyler's full foster care file. I pulled it 20 minutes ago through a FOIA request I filed last week. I volunteer with CASA, so I have access." He opened the folder. Pages of bureaucratic records, forms signed in triplicate, the machinery of a system that was supposed to protect children, but mostly just protected itself. "You want to know something interesting, Officer Daniels?" Tracker's voice was casual, conversational, but his eyes were hard. "This is the 4th CPS investigation into the Brooks household in 3 years. 4th. Every single one closed as unfounded within 72 hours. He laid the documents on the table. "Let everyone see. Now either these are the most unlucky innocent foster parents in Wisconsin, or someone at Dane County Child Protective Services has been systematically burying complaints." The room shifted. You could feel it. That moment when the narrative changed from bikers interfering with police work to bikers exposing systemic corruption. Officer Kim pulled Daniels aside. Their voices were low, but Garrett caught fragments. "Pattern of complaints. Look bad if we ignore this. Recording is pretty damning." Karen Brooks's smile was gone now. She'd moved back to the booth where David sat, both of them whispering urgently. David's hand was in his pocket, probably reaching for his phone, probably texting his lawyer. Too late. Ethan turned to the crowd of brothers, now filling the diner and spilling out onto the sidewalk. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. "Officers Daniels and Kim are going to arrest Karen and David Brooks. They're going to secure the residence at 1847 Riverside Avenue and conduct a welfare check on 7 additional children currently at that location. And we're going to accompany them as witnesses, as advocates, and as citizens who give a damn about whether children live or die in our community." He turned to Tyler, knelt down so he was eye level with the boy, just like Garrett had. "Tyler, you did something incredibly brave tonight. You asked for help when every adult in your life had taught you that asking for help only made things worse. You collected evidence. You survived 10 months of hell, and you kept fighting. That's courage. Real courage." Tyler's eyes were wet. He wiped them with the sleeve of Garrett's vest. Are the other kids going to be okay? Yeah, son, they are. I promise you that. The convoy moved through Madison like a parade of judgment. 3 police cruisers, 1 ambulance, and 83 motorcycles. 1847 Riverside Avenue was a quiet suburban development, the kind of neighborhood where every house looked the same, where Christmas lights twinkled on porches and inflatable Santas glowed in front yards, where neighbors heard children crying for months and told themselves it was nothing. The motorcycles lined the residential street, row after row, a wall of chrome and leather and witnesses who refused to look away. Garrett stood beside Tyler on the sidewalk. The boy was shaking, not from cold, from the knowledge of what was about to happen, what was about to be exposed. You don't have to go inside, Garrett said quietly. Doc Vaughn can take you to the ambulance, get you checked out, get you warm. No, Tyler's voice was small but firm. I want to make sure they really get them out. Officers approached the front door. Standard procedure, knock and announce. Give the occupants a chance to comply. But the door was already open, hanging loose on its hinges. Karen and David Brooks had run, fled the diner the moment they realized they couldn't talk their way out of this one. Inside, the house looked normal, clean, well-maintained, family photos on the walls, Christmas tree in the living room, presents underneath wrapped in cheerful paper, the performance of a happy home. The basement door was in the kitchen, heavy wood, industrial hinges, and 3 deadbolts on the outside, all locked. Officer Kim pulled out a key ring, started trying keys, one after another. The locks were specialized, not standard residential hardware. These were security bolts, the kind you use to keep people in, not out. It took 4 minutes to get them open. The smell hit them first. 8 children, 1 toilet, no ventilation, 10 months of confinement. The basement was freezing, 58 degrees according to the thermostat on the wall, which had been manually set and locked with a key. December in Wisconsin, and these children had been kept in temperatures cold enough to cause hypothermia. 4 metal bunk beds, thin blankets, no toys, no books, no comfort items of any kind. 7 children huddled together on one bottom bunk, ages 4 to 12. They flinched when the officers entered, made themselves smaller, preparing for violence because violence was what adults had taught them to expect. The youngest was a girl who looked about 4, dark blonde hair, pale skin. She started crying immediately. Not loud, quiet, the kind of crying that comes from learning that loud crying brings punishment. Doc Vaughn pushed past the officers. She'd seen trauma before. Burns, gunshots, car accidents, child abuse cases that made seasoned nurses vomit in supply closets. But this, the systematic, calculated neglect, this was different. Hey, sweethearts, she said softly, kneeling near the bunk, making herself small and non-threatening. My name is Patricia. I'm a nurse. These police officers are here to help you. Nobody's going to hurt you anymore. Okay. The oldest girl, maybe 11, spoke. Her voice was hoarse, damaged from screaming. Where's Tyler? Tyler is safe. He's with my friend Garrett. He's the one who asked us to come get you. Is he in trouble? The girl's voice shook. They always said if we told anyone we'd be in trouble, that we'd be separated, that nobody would ever want us. No, baby. Tyler's not in trouble. Tyler's a hero, and you're all heroes because you survived. And now we're taking you somewhere warm and safe. Doc Vaughn pulled out her phone and called the hospital. This is Patricia Vaughn, RN, calling from 1847 Riverside Avenue. I need ambulances for 7 pediatric patients ages approximately 4 to 12, all presenting with signs of severe neglect and malnutrition. We need full medical workups, mandatory reporters notified, and DCF emergency custody arranged. She paused, listening to someone on the other end, trying to tell her this could wait until morning. No, Doc said. Her voice went hard, authoritative, the voice of someone who'd spent 19 years in emergency medicine and wouldn't be argued with. They cannot wait until morning. These children need medical attention now. Outside, Garrett held Tyler as the boy watched 7 stretchers being loaded into ambulances. 7 children who'd been invisible for 10 months, who'd been crying for help and been ignored by teachers and neighbors and police and doctors and social workers. 7 children who were finally being seen. Tyler pressed his face into Garrett's chest, the leather vest still around his shoulders. I didn't think anyone would come. I thought I'd die down there, that we'd all die down there and nobody would know. Garrett felt something crack open in his chest, the place where he'd sealed off his grief, the place where Sophie lived in memory, the place that hurt too much to touch. Someone came, Garrett said, his voice rough with emotion. We came, and we're not going anywhere. Not until every single one of you is safe. That's my promise, Tyler. That's our promise. 67 motorcycles idled in the street, bearing witness, making sure the world knew that these children mattered, that their suffering wouldn't be invisible anymore, that brotherhood meant more than patches and leather and motorcycles. It meant showing up when the system failed, when the world looked away, when a child wrote "help me" in their own blood because speaking had become too dangerous. It meant protecting the ones who couldn't protect themselves. Even when it was hard, even when it cost everything, especially then. The ambulances pulled away one by one, 7 children heading to safety, heading to warmth, heading to the first real meal they'd had in months. And Garrett Cole stood in the street with Tyler Morgan in his arms and understood what the last 8 years had been preparing him for. He couldn't save Sophie, but he could save this boy, and that would have to be enough. The Brooks house had ghosts, not the supernatural kind, the worst kind, the kind that lived in spreadsheets and bank statements and carefully documented evidence of calculated cruelty, the kind that existed in numbers and transactions and the precise mathematics of how much you could profit from other people's suffering before anyone noticed. Tracker Park stood in the home office on the 2nd floor, surrounded by filing cabinets and a desk that looked like it belonged in a corporate boardroom, not a suburban foster home. Everything was organized, color-coded, labeled with that particular brand of obsessive-compulsive precision that marked people who committed crimes methodically, who planned their evil the way other people planned vacations. Wire Brennan sat at the desk with his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard, downloading everything: bank records, tax returns, email archives, building a digital fortress of evidence that would be admissible in court, that would survive appeals and defense lawyers and every legal challenge the Brooks could throw at it. Because Wire understood something that most people didn't. In the 21st century, criminals left trails, digital breadcrumbs, electronic confessions written in ones and zeros. You just had to know where to look. Hammer Thompson stood near the window, watching the street, watching the 83 motorcycles lined up like sentries, making sure nobody tried to interfere with what was about to unfold. His detective instincts were screaming. 26 years on Milwaukee PD had taught him to recognize crime scenes. And this house, this clean, respectable, Christmas-decorated house, this was a crime scene that had been hiding in plain sight for years. Tracker opened the first filing cabinet. Financial records going back 7 years. Everything meticulously preserved. Because people who committed fraud needed to track their profits, needed to know exactly how much they were making, how much they could get away with. The bank statements told the story in columns of numbers. Deposits, regular as clockwork, every month. From Wisconsin Department of Children and Families, $18,333. 8 children at $2,291.67 per month each. Simple math, basic arithmetic, the kind that added up to $220,000 per year. Jesus, Tracker breathed. They've been pulling in over 18 grand a month for almost 2 years. Ware pulled up expense records on his laptop. The other side of the equation, how much the Brooks actually spent on the children in their care. Food expenses, Wire said. His voice was flat, emotionless, the voice of someone reading numbers that represented something too terrible to process with feeling. $1,200 per month total for 8 children. That's $150 per child per month. Hammer turned from the window. What's the USDA estimate for feeding a child? $250 to $350 per month, depending on age and dietary needs. Wire's fingers kept typing, kept documenting. They were spending less than half the recommended amount and pocketing the difference. The credit card statements were worse because they showed exactly where the profit went. where the suffering of 8 children translated into comfort and luxury for their captors. $68,000, Chevy dealership, October 2024. A new truck while children starved in the basement, $32,000. Crystal blue pools, August 20. A swimming pool 8 children would never be allowed to use, $8,500. Disney World vacation packages, December 23. Tracker pulled the school records. Cross-referenced the dates. They went to Disney World December 15th through 21st last year. Tyler's homeschool records show he was marked present for educational activities during that week. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. They locked 8 children in a basement, Hammer said slowly, and went to Disney World for 6 days. Left them alone for 6 days with minimal food and no supervision. And came back, Wire added, to a system that never checked, never asked questions, never verified that the homeschooling was actually happening, never wondered why all 8 children were always present for educational activities but never seen outside the house. Tracker sat down hard in the office chair. 39 years old, and he'd seen a lot. Grew up in foster care, worked as a social worker before burning out, thought he understood the depths of human cruelty. He'd been wrong. Pull everything, he said. Every document, every receipt, every email. We're going to bury them so deep they'll never see daylight again. Wire's laptop chimed, email archive downloaded, 7 years of correspondence, thousands of messages, most of them mundane, bills and appointments and the administrative detritus of suburban life. But some of them were different. Wire opened a folder. November 2024. Internal emails between Karen and David Brooks, sent from her personal Gmail to his work email. The kind of casual communication between spouses who didn't think anyone would ever read their private correspondence. Subject line: December planning. Karen's message dated November 23rd. We need to tighten things up before the 28th inspection. I've already cut their portions by 15%. If we can pass this review, we're guaranteed another $220K next year. With your raise coming through and our new investment properties, we're on track to hit $400K household income by 2026. Not bad for charity work. David's response: agreed. The only concern is Tyler. He's old enough to be credible if he talks. The younger ones are easy. Nobody believes them. But a 10-year-old, we might need to consider requesting his transfer after the holidays. Document some behavioral issues. Get a fresh placement. Safer that way. Wire looked up from his screen. They were planning to get rid of Tyler right after Christmas, before he could become a bigger liability. Tracker's hands clenched into fists, which means tonight was his last chance. If he hadn't approached Garrett in that diner, he would have been transferred to another home within 2 weeks, and none of us would have ever known about the other 7. The mathematics of suffering, the calculus of evil. How close they'd come to missing this. How many children had already been missed? How many were still being missed right now in houses just like this one? Hammer pulled out his phone. I'm calling Ethan. We need to expand this investigation. Pull every foster care file in Dane County. Cross-reference complaint patterns. Find out how many other homes are running the same operation. But Wire was already ahead of him, fingers flying across keyboard, accessing databases that shouldn't have been accessible, using skills that lived in ethical gray areas but served a higher purpose. Already on it, Wire said, and I found something else. He turned the laptop so they could all see. A different file, going back further, before the Brooks became foster parents. Previous foster care incident from 2021. A 7-year-old girl named Emma Kincaid was removed from their care after showing up to a routine medical checkup with suspicious injuries. CPS investigated. Brooks claimed the child was self-harming due to trauma. Investigation found insufficient evidence of abuse. Tracker leaned forward, reading over Wire's shoulder. What happened to Emma? Placed with a different family. She's 10 now, living with an adoptive family in Michigan. Wire clicked through more files. But here's the thing. Look at the Brooks bank records from that time period. March 21, a deposit, $15,000 from Wisconsin Department of Children and Families. Memo line settlement payment. The Brooks sued, Wire said, claimed the investigation damaged their reputation. threatened legal action, and the state paid them off rather than go to court. $15,000 to make the problem go away. And then the Brooks went right back to fostering children. Hammer's jaw clenched. So the system knew. They knew these people had been investigated. They knew a child had been removed with suspicious injuries. And they still let them keep fostering. Not just let them, Tracker said, paid them, compensated them for the inconvenience of being investigated, sent them a message that if you lawyer up and make enough noise, the state will back down rather than fight. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about Karen and David Brooks. This was about systemic failure, about a machine designed to protect children that had learned to protect itself instead, that chose convenience over truth, that selected institutional reputation over individual lives. Wire opened another folder, foster care placement history, going back 7 years, to when the Brooks first became licensed foster parents. 23 different children, Wire said, scrolling through pages of names and dates, over 7 years. Not a single placement lasted longer than 11 months. Children always moved to better placements or reunified with family. Nobody questioned why a couple supposedly dedicated to foster care never adopted a single child, never had a long-term placement, just a constant rotation of kids coming and going. Because that's the perfect cover, Hammer said. Short-term placements look normal in the foster system. Kids age out, biological parents get their act together, adoptive families come forward. Nobody looks twice at turnover, as long as the paperwork is clean. And the paperwork was always clean, Tracker added, because they were good at this. Systematic, professional. They knew exactly how to work the system, how to present well, how to say the right things, how to make the caseworkers believe them. Wire pulled up another email, this one from Karen Brooks to a friend, sent 2 years ago, before they'd reached their full capacity of 8 children. Subject line, the secret to success. Karen's message. You asked how we afford the new house. It's simple, foster care. The payments are generous if you scale up. Most people take 1 or 2 kids and struggle. We've got 6 now, planning for 8. The key is efficiency, minimal overhead. Keep them fed enough to pass inspections, but don't waste money on extras. No activities, no therapy, basics only. The profit margin is incredible if you run it like a business, which, let's be honest, it is. The friend's response. Aren't you worried about the kid? That sounds pretty harsh. Karen's reply, they're foster kids. Nobody's watching that closely. And honestly, they're getting better care here than wherever they came from. Roof over their heads, regular meals, structure. That's more than most of them had before. I'm doing them a favor. Tracker stood up, paced, needed to move before he put his fist through the wall. She actually believed it. That's what's terrifying. She convinced herself this was charity work. That starving children and locking them in a basement was somehow helping them. That's how people like this operate, Hammer said, his detective voice. Clinical, analytical. The voice that helped him process horrors without breaking. They reframe their actions, tell themselves stories that make them the hero. Karen Brooks doesn't think she's a criminal. She thinks she's a successful entrepreneur who found an underutilized market opportunity. Wire's laptop chimed again. Another file opened. This one made everyone in the room go still. I found something else, Wire said. His voice had changed, gone quiet. The way voices go when confronting something that doesn't fit, something worse. He pulled up insurance records, life insurance policies, standard practice for responsible adults. Karen Brooks, listed as beneficiary on a policy taken out in 2010, before they started fostering. Policyholder Margaret Brooks, Karen's mother. Death benefit $164,000. Date of death July 2020. Cause of death accidental fall down basement stairs. The room went silent. Hammer moved first. Years of detective work kicking in. Pull everything. Medical records, police reports, death certificate, anything connected to Margaret Brooks. Wire was already typing, accessing databases, building a timeline, documenting what would become the most damning evidence against the Brooks. Margaret Brooks, age 73 at time of death, previously living independently, moved in with her daughter in April 2020, 3 months before her death. Medical records painted a story. April 2020 primary care visit. Doctor notes Margaret in good health for her age. Some arthritis, blood pressure slightly elevated, otherwise normal. May 2020 ER visit. Suspicious bruising on arms and back. Margaret claims she fell in the garden. Doctor notes injuries inconsistent with described fall. Recommends social work consult. Note in chart, patient declined, seemed afraid. June 2020, primary care follow-up. Weight loss of 12 pounds in 2 months. Doctor notes possible malnutrition. Margaret claims she's just not very hungry lately. Lab work ordered. Shows vitamin deficiencies consistent with inadequate diet. June 2020, Adult Protective Services complaint filed by neighbor. Investigated and closed as unfounded after one visit. Case notes, Karen Brooks presented as caring daughter. Margaret seemed confused but denied any problems. Home appeared clean and well-maintained. July 2020, Margaret Brooks found dead at bottom of basement stairs by paramedics responding to Karen's 911 call. Medical examiner ruled a death accidental, consistent with fall. Case closed. August 2020, insurance payout, $164,000 deposited into Karen Brooks's bank account. September 2020, Crystal Blue Pool's invoice, $32,000 for in-ground pool installation. Hammer stood at the window, looking out at the quiet suburban street. At the house across the way, where a neighbor named Melissa Ashford had heard children crying at night and called police once before telling herself it wasn't her business. It's the same pattern, Hammer said. Take in vulnerable people who depend on you. Isolate them, neglect them, profit from them. And if anyone questions it, you're the respectable church-going family doing noble charity work. Who's going to believe a confused elderly woman or traumatized foster kids over you? Tracker pulled up Margaret's death certificate. Read it carefully, looking for what wasn't there as much as what was. The medical examiner didn't do a full autopsy, Tracker said. Death appeared accidental. Karen Brooks was the grieving daughter. Why would anyone question it? But look at the timeline. Margaret moved in April. By May, she's showing up at the ER with suspicious bruising. By June, she's malnourished and an APS complaint gets filed. By July, she's dead. 3 months, Wire said. Margaret Brooks lasted 3 months in her daughter's care. These 8 foster children have been there 10 months. They're more durable, younger, harder to kill accidentally, but the pattern's the same. A knock on the door, Ethan entered, face grave. He'd been coordinating with the police, making sure everything was documented properly, making sure the case would stick. We've got a problem, Ethan said. Karen and David Brooks aren't at the house. Officers went to arrest them and they're gone. Left the diner, got in their car, and disappeared. Hammer's cop instincts kicked in. They're running. Probably had a lawyer on speed dial. Got advice to get out before the arrest warrant came through. Can they get far? Tracker asked. Depends on how much cash they have access to, Hammer said, and how much they're willing to leave behind. But my guess, they're not running far. They're not criminal masterminds. They're suburbanites who got caught. They'll do what scared people always do. Go somewhere familiar. Somewhere they feel safe. Wire pulled up credit card records. Recent transactions. Last charge was 30 minutes ago. Mike's gambling den, 4 miles from here. David Brooks is a regular there. Loyalty card shows he visits 3 times a week. Hammer smiled, the smile of a predator who just found his prey. They went to a casino, because when your entire criminal enterprise is collapsing, obviously the smart move is to go gambling. Or, Ethan said, they're doing what they've always done, pretending everything is normal, performing respectability, telling themselves that if they just act like nothing is wrong, then nothing is wrong. 20 minutes later, 6 police cruisers pulled up to Mike's gambling den, a 24-hour casino bar on the outskirts of Madison. The kind of place that catered to people who gambled their paychecks and told themselves they were having fun. 43 Hells Angels followed on motorcycles. Not to interfere, just to witness, just to make sure Karen and David Brooks understood that their crimes hadn't been invisible. that 8 children mattered, that someone had shown up. Officers found them at a slot machine. David was playing video poker, beer in one hand, casually feeding $20 bills into the machine like it was any other Thursday night. Karen sat beside him, scrolling through her phone, probably deleting evidence, probably texting her lawyer. They looked up when 6 officers approached. Daniels and Kim plus 4 others from the night shift. Behind them, Ethan and Hammer. Behind them, 43 bikers in leather vests. The casino had gone quiet, slot machines still chiming their electronic songs. But every person in the building watching as 2 respectable-looking suburban foster parents were about to be arrested. David Brooks looked annoyed, actually annoyed, like he'd been interrupted during an important meeting. Not caught fleeing the scene of a crime that had destroyed 8 children's lives for 10 months. "Can I help you?" David said, the audacity of people who'd never been held accountable, who'd learned that acting innocent was the same as being innocent. "David James Brooks and Karen Marie Brooks," Officer Daniels said, voice formal, careful, every word mattering because defense lawyers would scrutinize every syllable. "You're under arrest for felony child abuse, child endangerment fraud, and false imprisonment." He read them their Miranda rights, right there in the casino, every word clear, every procedure followed exactly. David's face went red. "This is ridiculous. You can't just..." "Sir, put your hands behind your back." Karen started crying, real tears. The kind that might have worked on a church congregation or a CPS caseworker. Tears that had probably saved her before. That had made people feel sorry for her. That had turned her from perpetrator into victim. "We've done nothing wrong," Karen said. Voice breaking, performance perfected through years of practice. "We've dedicated our lives to helping children that nobody else wanted. This is persecution. This is..." "Ma'am, hands behind your back now." The casino had gone completely silent. Slot machines still chiming, but no one playing them. Every employee and patron watching as 2 people who looked like neighbors were handcuffed. That's when Karen saw the bikers. 43 men and women in leather vests standing in formation near the door. Not blocking the exit, not threatening, just watching, bearing witness. Her mask finally cracked. "You can't do this," Karen screamed, not crying anymore, furious. "We're good people. We go to church, we volunteer. We've done nothing but try to help those damaged children, and this is how we're repaid. With persecution, with lies from ungrateful." "That's enough," Officer Kim said. They led Karen and David Brooks through the casino, past the bikers, into separate patrol cars. The casino parking lot was lit up like daylight. Police cruisers, ambulances still on standby. 43 motorcycles, every employee and patron who'd come outside to watch. Ethan stood near Garrett, both watching the patrol cars pull away. "Think it'll stick?" Garrett asked. Tyler was at the hospital now, being examined, being fed, being told for the first time in 10 months that he was safe. "Yeah," Ethan said. "Recording alone would probably be enough. Add in the financial records, the witness testimonies, the 7 other children, the pattern of previous investigations, and the possible insurance fraud related to Margaret Brooks. They'll take a plea deal before this sees trial. My guess is 15 years each. Eligible for parole in 8. That's not enough." "No," Ethan agreed. "It's not, but it's what we've got. And it's more than those kids had yesterday." 3 days later, Judge Caroline Martinez presided over the bail hearing. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, more people standing in the back. Word had spread, Hell's Angels protecting foster children. The story had been picked up by local news, then national news, then social media. Suddenly everyone cared. Suddenly 8 invisible children mattered. Karen and David Brooks sat at the defense table with their public defender, a man who looked exhausted just reading the case file, who knew he was defending the indefensible, who was doing his job because someone had to, because even monsters deserve the representation. The DA presented evidence: 23 previous foster children, 4 closed investigations, 1 suspicious death of an elderly parent with a $164,000 life insurance payout, 8 current victims who would spend the next decade in therapy trying to recover from 10 months of calculated abuse. Judge Martinez was 62 years old, gray hair, reading glasses, 28 years on the bench. She'd seen everything, thought nothing could surprise her. She was wrong. She looked at Karen and David Brooks over her glasses. The evidence presented suggests a pattern of exploitation spanning multiple years and multiple victims. The vulnerable populations you had access to, foster children, elderly dependents, trusted you with their care, and you systematically betrayed that trust for financial gain. She paused. Let the words land. Let everyone in the courtroom understand the gravity of what had been exposed. I'm setting bail at $750,000 each with electronic monitoring. If you somehow make bail, you are not to have contact with any of the 8 minor victims, any former foster children, or any individuals under the age of 18. Preliminary hearing is set for January 18th. The gavel came down. Final. Binding. Karen Brooks cried. David Brooks stared straight ahead, face blank, still not understanding, still thinking this was something that would blow over, that his lawyer would fix, that he could talk his way out of. He couldn't. In the gallery, Tyler Morgan sat between Garrett Cole and his new temporary foster parents, Cordelia and Magnus Whitaker, both in their 50s, who'd fostered 12 children over the past decade. 2 of those children they'd adopted. The others they'd help reunify with biological family or transition to permanent placements. They had a track record, references, a home that had been inspected not by overwhelmed caseworkers, but by advocates who actually gave a damn. Tyler wore clean clothes now, jeans that actually fit, a blue sweater, sneakers that were his size. He'd gained 3 pounds in 3 days of proper meals. His finger had been treated, bandaged, was healing. When the judge announced the bail amount, Tyler looked up at Garrett. Is it over? The legal part is just starting, Garrett said honestly. There will be a trial, probably next year. You might have to testify, though the DA will try to avoid that. But the important part, the part where you were in danger. Yeah, that's over. You're safe now. Tyler nodded, then quietly. Merry Christmas. It was 3 days late, but Garrett smiled anyway. Merry Christmas, Tyler. Outside the courthouse, the Hells Angels assembled. 83 members from Wisconsin, 45 from Illinois, 38 from Minnesota, 30 from Iowa. Nearly 200 bikers had mobilized in under 4 hours on Christmas Eve. Dropped everything, showed up, made sure 8 invisible children were finally seen. Ethan stood on the courthouse steps, looking at his brothers and sisters, at the family he'd chosen, the family that had chosen him back. What we did this week was legal strategic clean, Ethan said, voice carrying across the crowd. We didn't threaten anyone. We didn't touch anyone. We showed up. We documented everything. We assisted law enforcement, and we made sure 8 children who'd been invisible for 10 months were finally seen. He paused, let the weight of those words settle. But this isn't over, because Tyler Morgan was one of 23. Emma Kincaid was one of 23. And somewhere right now in houses just like 1847 Riverside Avenue, there are children suffering. Children being failed by the system. Children writing, "Help me," in their own blood because speaking has become too dangerous. The crowd was silent, listening, understanding what was being asked of them. We're going to find them, Ethan said. We're going to pay attention. We're going to show up. We're going to refuse to accept unfounded as an answer when a child says they're being hurt. And we're going to build something better than what failed Tyler Morgan 3 times before he had to ask a stranger at a diner. Wire Brennan stepped forward, laptop in hand. Angels Watch, that's what we're calling it. A coordinated network across 4 Hells Angels chapters. Wisconsin, Illinois, Minnesota, Iowa. 216 members, including 10 with law enforcement backgrounds, 9 with social work experience, 12 with medical training, 6 with legal degrees. He pulled up a presentation, showed it on his laptop screen. Professional, organized, systematic. Our mission is simple. Assist with foster care oversight in our communities. Attend CPS hearings as advocates. Conduct welfare checks on at-risk placements. Provide emergency resources when the system moves too slowly. And most importantly, believe children when they say something is wrong. Tracker Park stood beside Wire. This isn't vigilante justice. This is organized advocacy. backed by people who understand that the system can't fix itself, but it can be pressured, monitored, forced to do better when citizens refuse to look away. Hammer Thompson. We've already received 62 complaints in the last 8 hours from our members who have been reviewing closed cases. Every single case involving the Brooks that was marked unfounded. We're demanding they reopen investigations. And the DA's office called me an hour ago. They want to meet tomorrow to discuss systematic reforms. Doc Vaughn, we're creating training protocols, how to document evidence, how to work within legal boundaries, how to assist law enforcement without interfering, how to be effective advocates instead of angry vigilantes. The message was clear. This wasn't about revenge. This was about prevention. About making sure that what happened to Tyler Morgan and 7 other children never happened again. About building a system that actually protected the vulnerable instead of just protecting itself. Garrett stood in the back, holding Tyler's hand, watching his brothers and sisters commit to something bigger than motorcycles and leather vests and weekend rides. Watching them commit to showing up, to paying attention, to refusing to look away. Tyler tugged on Garrett's vest. Are they really going to do all that help other kids like me? Yeah, Garrett said, they are. That's what brotherhood means. Not just taking care of our own, but making sure nobody else has to suffer alone. Tyler was quiet for a moment, then, can I help when I'm older? Can I be part of Angel's Watch? Garrett looked down at this 10-year-old boy who'd survived 10 months of hell, who'd been brave enough to bite his own finger until it bled so he could write, "Help me" on a napkin, who'd recorded evidence and kept it hidden and approached a scary-looking stranger because he had no one else left to ask. Yeah, Tyler, when you're older, you can help because you understand something most people don't. You understand what it's like to be invisible, to be crying for help while everyone walks past. And that understanding, that empathy, that's what's going to save the next kid who needs someone to show up. The sun set over Madison. The temperature dropped. December in Wisconsin. Cold enough to hurt. Cold enough that 8 children locked in an unheated basement would have eventually frozen to death. But they didn't, because one boy was brave enough to ask for help, and one man was brave enough to answer. And 200 bikers decided that Christmas Eve was the perfect night to make sure no child spent another night in hell. The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. But for the first time in 10 months, 8 children slept somewhere warm, somewhere safe, somewhere people actually cared whether they lived or died. That it was enough for now. That was everything. The hospital at 4:30 in the morning had a particular quality of silence. Not peaceful, exhausted. The kind of quiet that comes after trauma, after crisis, after everything that can be done has been done, and all that's left is waiting. Tyler Morgan sat in a hospital bed that was too big for him. Clean white sheets, heated blanket, IV in his arm pumping fluids and nutrients into a body that had been starved for 10 months. He'd gained 3 pounds in 3 days. Not enough to make him look healthy, but enough to prove that recovery was possible. Garrett Cole sat in the chair beside the bed. He'd been there since Tyler arrived. 13 hours now. Hadn't left except to use the bathroom. Wouldn't leave until Tyler was ready for him to go. Because that's what showing up meant. Not just the dramatic rescue. Not just the satisfying moment when the bad guys got arrested. But the long, tedious, unglamorous work of staying. Of being present. Of proving through repetition that you meant what you said. That you weren't going anywhere. The door opened quietly. Dr. Sandra Yee entered. 42 years old, pediatrician at UW Hospital for 15 years. She'd examined Tyler 8 months ago, had seen a 10-year-old boy who was underweight and terrified, had accepted Karen Brooks' explanation that he was a picky eater traumatized by his mother's death, had missed every sign that screamed abuse. She stood in the doorway now, face pale, hands shaking slightly as she held Tyler's medical chart. The chart that documented everything she should have seen, everything she should have done. I failed him, Dr. Yee said quietly, not to Garrett, to Doc Vaughn, who stood near the window reviewing labs and x-rays and the medical evidence of 10 months of systematic neglect. He was sitting right there in my exam room last April, underweight and terrified. And I believed her. I believe Karen Brooks when she said he was just traumatized. I noted his weight loss and did nothing. Doc Vaughn didn't sugarcoat it, didn't offer empty comfort. 19 years as a trauma nurse had taught her that sometimes people needed honesty more than kindness. Yeah, Doc said, you did fail him. You missed signs that should have been obvious. But you know what? So did teachers, neighbors, police officers, CPS caseworkers. This wasn't one person's failure. It was a system designed to believe respectable-looking adults over vulnerable children. She paused, let that sink in, then continued. Gentler now. That doesn't excuse it. But you're here now at 4:30 in the morning on December 28th. You're here. So either you can drown in guilt, or you can help make sure Tyler and those 7 other kids get the care they should have gotten 18 months ago. Your choice. Yi wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders. The posture of someone who'd made a decision. What do they need? Everything, Doc said. Complete medical workups, dental care. 3 of them have cavities that have probably been hurting for months. Nutritional plans that account for refeeding syndrome, trauma therapy, educational assessments to figure out where they're at academically after months of no schooling, and someone to coordinate all of it because DCF is going to be overwhelmed. I'll coordinate it, Dr. Yi said. Her voice was firm now, determined. All 8 kids, I'll make sure they get every appointment, every follow-up, every service they need. Consider it my, don't do it for penance, Garrett said from the bedside. Tyler was asleep now. Safe sleep, the kind that came with security instead of exhaustion. Do it because they deserve it. Yi nodded, looked at the sleeping boy in the bed, at the IV pumping life back into him, at the monitor showing vital signs that were slowly, painfully returning to normal ranges. They deserve it, she repeated. They deserve everything. By 6:15 a.m., Tracker Park had emergency housing arranged, not a group home, not a temporary shelter. 8 separate foster placements with families he'd personally vetted, families from the CASA network who'd been through extensive training, who'd passed enhanced background checks, who understood that these children would need patience and safety and consistency, not performance, not charity. Family, Tyler would stay with Cordelia and Magnus Whitaker. Both in their 50s, Cordelia taught middle school English. Magnus worked as an architect. They'd fostered 12 children over the past decade. 2 of those children they'd adopted. The others they'd helped reunify with biological family or transition to permanent placements. They had a track record. References. A home that had been inspected not by overwhelmed caseworkers, but by advocates who actually gave a damn. Tracker sat with Tyler in his hospital room at 7 a.m., showing him pictures on his phone, not pushing, just offering information, letting Tyler control the conversation. This is where you'll be staying, Tracker said. It's temporary, just until DCF figures out a long-term plan. But the Whitakers are good people. I've known them for 6 years. They've got a guest room that's already set up. Warm bed, your own bathroom, books on the shelves if you like reading. Tyler studied the photos. A modest 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but clean, safe, normal. And their house rule is simple. Tracker continued, if you're scared, if you need something, if anything feels wrong, you speak up. They listen. Tyler's voice was small. What about the others, the other 7 kids? Will I see them? Yeah, I'm coordinating weekly group sessions. A chance for all 8 of you to see each other. Spend time together. You've been through something nobody should go through, and you did it together. That matters. Those bonds matter. Tyler nodded slowly, processing. Then, and Karen and David. Where are they? Jail, Garrett said. Dane County lockup. Bail hearing was 3 days ago. Judge set bail at $750,000 each. They can't make it. They spent all their money on trucks and pools and vacations. They've got nothing left. How long will they be in prison? Garrett and Tracker exchanged glances. How much truth did a 10-year-old need? All of it, Garrett decided. Tyler had earned honesty, had survived by being smart and observant and aware. Treating him like he couldn't handle reality would be insulting. The DA is building a case for 25 to 30 years each, Garrett said. Could end up being less if they take a plea deal. Maybe 15 years. Eligible for parole after 8. But even the minimum, you'll be 18 years old before they're up for parole. And if they do get released, there'll be restraining orders. They can't contact you, can't come near you. They're done hurting people. For the first time since Garrett had met him, Tyler's shoulders relaxed. Not all the way. Trauma doesn't release its grip that easily, but enough that you could see the child underneath. The kid who'd lost his mother at 8 years old and then lost everything else for 10 months after that. I'm tired, Tyler said. Then sleep, Garrett said. Real sleep, safe sleep. Nobody's going to hurt you. Nobody's going to lock you in a basement. You're in a hospital with nurses and doctors and about 15 bikers standing guard outside, making sure nobody gets in here who shouldn't. Tyler looked toward the door. Sure enough, through the small window, you could see Hammer Thompson sitting in a chair in the hallway, reading a paperback, sipping coffee, just there, present. Why do they care? Taylor asked. They don't even know me. Garrett thought about how to answer that, about brotherhood and protection and the unspoken code that meant you showed up when someone needed you even if you'd never met them before. 8 years ago, I lost my daughter to leukemia, Garrett said. Sophie was 7 years old, and I couldn't save her. I spent every day of her illness trying, and I failed. But you saved yourself. You were brave enough to walk up to a scary-looking stranger and ask for help. You were smart enough to collect evidence. You were strong enough to survive 10 months of adults telling you that you didn't matter. He squeezed Tyler's shoulder gently. So when you asked for help, when you handed me that napkin with blood on it, you weren't just asking me. You were asking every person who's ever felt powerless, who's ever wished someone had shown up for them, who's ever known what it's like to need protection and not get it. We care because you matter, because every kid matters, and because I was just following protocol, or I didn't want to interfere, or I thought someone else would handle it. Those are the excuses people give when they choose comfort over courage. We're not those people. Tyler pulled Garrett's leather vest tighter around his shoulders, the vest that had been draped over him that first night in the diner, the vest that said he was under protection, that he wasn't alone anymore. Can I keep this for a while? Tyler asked. Yeah, son, however long you need it. By noon on Christmas Day, Wire Brennan had established something that would change foster care oversight in 4 states. Angels Watch, a coordinated network across 4 Hells Angels chapters. Wisconsin, Illinois, Minnesota, Iowa, 216 members, including 10 with law enforcement backgrounds, 9 with social work experience, 12 with medical training, 6 with legal degrees. Their mission was simple but revolutionary. Assist with foster care oversight in their communities, attend CPS hearings as advocates, conduct welfare checks on at-risk placements, provide emergency resources when the system moved too slowly, and most importantly, believe children when they said something was wrong. Wire built a secure database, encrypted communication channels, training protocols for how to document evidence, how to work within legal boundaries, how to assist law enforcement without interfering. This wasn't vigilante justice. This was organized advocacy backed by people who understood that the system couldn't fix itself. But it could be pressured, monitored, forced to do better when citizens refused to look away. The response was immediate. Wisconsin DCF received 62 complaints in the first 8 hours from Angels Watch members who'd been reviewing closed cases. Every single case involving the Brooks that had been marked unfounded, demanding they reopen investigations, demanding accountability, demanding change. The DA's office called Ethan Cole at 2 p.m. We need to meet tomorrow, discuss systematic reforms. Because what your people uncovered, this isn't just about Karen and David Brooks. This is about how many others are out there, how many cases we've missed, how many children are suffering right now because the system failed them. Ethan sat in his home office, gray beard, reading glasses, looking more like a professor than the president of a motorcycle club, which was exactly what made him effective. He understood how to work within the system, how to apply pressure without breaking laws, how to force change through strategic advocacy instead of brute force. We'll meet, Ethan said, but understand something. We're not asking for permission. We're not requesting cooperation. We're informing you that Angels Watch is operational, that we will attend every foster care hearing in our jurisdiction, that we will document every case, that we will shine a light on every failure. You can work with us or against us, but we're not going away. A pause on the other end of the line. Then we want to work with you because frankly, you're doing the job we should have been doing all along. And maybe if we're lucky, you can help us figure out how to do it better. 3 months later, on a cold March morning, the Brooks took a plea deal, 15 years each in state prison, no parole eligibility for 8 years. When they were released, they'd be registered offenders, barred from working with children or vulnerable adults, monitored for the rest of their lives. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. And it meant Tyler and the other 7 children wouldn't have to testify, wouldn't have to relive their trauma in a courtroom while defense lawyers tried to make them look like liars. The judge accepted the plea, looked at Karen and David Brooks one final time. You exploited the most vulnerable people in our society, children who had already lost everything, who trusted the system to protect them, and you betrayed that trust for profit. I hope that in the years you spend in prison, you come to understand the magnitude of what you've done, though I doubt you will. The gavel came down. Karen Brooks cried. David Brooks stared straight ahead, still not understanding, still not grasping that his comfortable life was over, that he'd destroyed 8 children's childhoods and would pay for it with years of his own freedom. Outside the courthouse, Garrett stood with Tyler. The boy was different now. 3 months of proper nutrition, 3 months of therapy, 3 months of sleeping in a real bed, in a warm room where no one locked the door from the outside. He'd gained 23 pounds, grown 2 inches. His face had filled out. His eyes were less haunted. He smiled sometimes, laughed occasionally, was learning that joy was allowed. That happiness wasn't something that would be punished. Is it really over? Tyler asked. The legal part is, Garrett said, the healing part. That takes longer, but you're doing it. You're surviving. You're recovering. You're proving every day that they didn't break you. Tyler nodded, looked up at Garrett with eyes that were still old, but getting younger. The Whitakers want to adopt me. All the legal stuff. Make it permanent. They asked if I wanted that. What did you tell them? I said yes. Is that okay? I know it's only been 3 months, and I still miss my real mom. But Cordelia and Magnus, they're good. They listen. They care. They make me feel safe. Garrett felt something crack open in his chest, the place where Sophie lived, the place that hurt. But in a different way now, not just grief, also purpose, also meaning, also the understanding that he couldn't save his daughter, but he'd helped save this boy. That's more than okay, Garrett said. That's everything. Your mom would want you to be happy, to be safe, to have a family that loves you. Cordelia and Magnus aren't replacing her. They're making sure you have people who show up, who stay, who choose you. Like you, Tyler said. You showed up, you stayed, you chose me when nobody else would. 6 months after that Christmas Eve in Maple Street Diner, the Hells Angels, Wisconsin chapter threw a birthday party. Not at a clubhouse, not at a bar, at Lake Kegonsa State Park, 45 minutes outside Madison, where 180 bikers and their families gathered with grills and picnic tables and a birthday cake shaped like a motorcycle. Tyler Cole Morgan Whitaker turned 11 years old, surrounded by people who'd shown up for him when everyone else had failed. The Whitakers had adopted him officially in April. Full legal adoption, permanent placement. He'd kept Morgan as part of his name, honoring his mother, but added Whitaker. Because Cordelia and Magnus were his family now too, and families didn't have to be blood to be real. He had a family, a real one, the kind where nobody locked doors from the outside and breakfast happened every morning and I love you meant actual love, not performance. He'd gained 23 pounds total now, grown 2 inches, started 6th grade at a new school where he'd made honor roll by December, joined the science club, had friends who didn't know about his past, who just knew him as Tyler. The smart kid who was good at math and told funny jokes and always had Garrett's leather vest in his backpack. His therapist said he was doing remarkably well, which meant he still had nightmares sometimes, still flinched at sudden movements, still carried that vest everywhere, even though he didn't wear it anymore. But he was healing, slowly, in his own time, on his own terms. The other 7 children were thriving too, different families, different schools, different paths to recovery, But they saw each other every other week for group sessions coordinated by Tracker, where they could talk about what they'd survived, where they could remind each other that they weren't alone, that what happened wasn't their fault, that they deserved to be happy. Angels Watch had expanded to 11 states, 437 Hells Angels members trained as child advocates. They'd assisted with 127 cases in 6 months, some as simple as attending a CPS hearing to ask hard questions, others as complex as coordinating multi-state investigations when vulnerable children were moved across borders. The system was changing, slowly, grudgingly, but changing. Because now someone was watching, someone was paying attention, someone cared enough to show up and refuse to accept unfounded as an answer when a child said they were being hurt. Bullying reports at Tyler's school had dropped 78% after Principal Morrison invited Ethan Cole to speak at an assembly to talk about what courage actually looked like, not fighting, not intimidation, but standing up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves, protecting the vulnerable, refusing to be a bystander. The kids had listened, really listened, because the message came from someone who'd lived it, who'd proven through action that showing up mattered, that one person could make a difference. That courage was a choice anyone could make. The party was loud, chaotic, beautiful, kids running everywhere, adults laughing, the smell of burgers on the grill mixing with lake water and summer air, the sound of happiness that came from community, from chosen family, from people who decided that protecting children was more important than comfort or convenience or looking the other way. Garrett stood near the grill, flipping burgers, watching Tyler run past with 2 other kids his age, children of club members, friends he'd made in the 6 months since that Christmas Eve. He was laughing. That sound, a child laughing without fear, without checking over his shoulder, without wondering if he'd be punished for being too loud. That was the sound of healing. Doc Vaughn walked over, handed Garrett a beer. "You did good, Reaper." "We all did." "No," Doc said. "You made the choice. When that kid walked up to you in the diner, you could have looked away, could have told yourself it wasn't your problem, that he'd probably be fine, that someone else would handle it. Most people would have. Most people did. 3 teachers, 2 police officers, 1 doctor, half a dozen neighbors. But you didn't. You believed him. You called for backup. You stayed." Garrett watched Tyler blow out candles on his cake. 11 candles, one for each year of a life that almost ended at 10. That had been saved by a napkin and blood and a stranger who chose courage over comfort. "I think about that night a lot," Garrett said, "about how close we came to missing him. If the Brooks had left the diner 5 minutes earlier, if Tyler had been too scared to approach me, if I'd been too focused on my book to notice a bleeding kid walking toward my table, how many kids are we missing right now because the timing isn't right, or they're too scared, or we're too distracted?" "That's why Angels Watch matters," Doc said. "We can't save everyone, but we can pay attention. We can show up. We can refuse to accept unfounded as an answer when a child says they're being hurt. We can be the people who choose to see instead of looking away." Later that afternoon, after the cake had been eaten and the presents had been opened and the party was winding down, Tyler stood on a picnic table, wearing Garrett's leather vest one last time. 11 years old, alive, safe, surrounded by 180 bikers who'd shown up on Christmas Eve because one child asked for help and one man believed him. "I want to say thank you," Tyler said, his voice carrying across the park, stronger now than 6 months ago, more confident, "for showing up, for believing me when nobody else would, for making sure I didn't have to spend one more night in that basement." He looked at Garrett, at the man who'd saved him, who'd stayed, who'd proven that some promises were kept even when they were hard. "And I want to give this back." Tyler started to take off the vest. Garrett stopped him, gently. "You keep it until you're ready to pass it on." Tyler looked confused. "Pass it on? Pass it on to the next kid who needs to know they're not alone. Could be next month, could be 10 years from now. But when you meet someone who's where you were scared and invisible and convinced nobody cares, you give them this vest. You tell them they're under protection, and you show up for them the way we showed up for you." Understanding dawned in Tyler's eyes. This wasn't just about him. This was about legacy, about carrying forward the gift he'd been given, about becoming the kind of person who showed up when others needed help. I can do that, Tyler said, pulling the vest back on, feeling the weight of it differently now, not as armor, as responsibility, as purpose. I know you can, Garrett said, because you're a survivor. And survivors don't just heal, they help others heal too. The sun set over Lake Kagansa, golden light painting the water, casting long shadows, making everything beautiful the way Wisconsin summers do. Brief and precious and worth savoring because winter always comes back. People started packing up, loading grills and coolers and folding chairs, kids protesting that they didn't want to leave, adults promising they'd come back soon. The comfortable chaos of family gatherings winding down. Garrett stood at the water's edge, watching the last light fade, thinking about Sophie, about the daughter he'd lost, about the guilt he'd carried for 8 years, the weight of being unable to save her, of watching her die despite everything he knew, everything he tried, everything he sacrificed. Tyler appeared beside him, quiet, intuitive in the way trauma survivors often are, able to read emotions, to sense when someone needed company or when they needed to speak. "You're thinking about her, aren't you?" Tyler said. "Your daughter, Sophie." Garrett nodded. "Yeah, I think about her every day, but differently now. Less about what I lost, more about what she taught me, about showing up, about fighting for people even when the fight seems impossible, about caring enough to try even when you might fail. Do you think she'd be proud of what you did saving me and the others?" Garrett looked down at this 11-year-old boy who'd survived hell and was learning to be a kid again, who asked profound questions and deserved honest answers. "Yeah," Garrett said. "I think she would be. I think Sophie would have liked you, would have been your friend, would have been proud that her dad chose courage when it mattered." Tyler was quiet for a moment. "Then I'm going to make you proud too. I'm going to help other kids. When I'm older, I'm going to be part of Angel's Watch. I'm going to show up the way you showed up for me." "I know you will," Garrett said. "And you're already making me proud. Every day, just by surviving, by healing, by choosing to be happy instead of letting what happened define you." They stood together, watching the sun set, father and son in all the ways that mattered, bound not by blood, but by the moment when one asked for help and the other refused to look away, by the decision to show up, to stay, to prove that promises made to vulnerable children were sacred trusts that couldn't be broken. Ethan walked over, stood with them. 3 generations of Cole men who'd learned that family was choice, that brotherhood was earned, that protecting the vulnerable was the highest calling. "Thinking about doing this again next year," Ethan said. "Make it a tradition. Angels Watch birthday party for every kid we help. Celebrate their survival, their healing, remind them they're not alone." "That's a lot of parties," Garrett said. "Good, good," Ethan said. "Should be on a lot of parties. Should be so many parties we can't keep track. Because that means we're helping. We're showing up. We're making sure kids don't fall through the cracks." Tyler looked up at both of them. "Can I help plan them? The parties I know, what helped me, what made me I feel safe. Maybe I can help make other kids feel that way too." "Yeah," Ethan said, "you can help. Because nobody understands what these kids need better than someone who's been where they are. Your experience, your survival. That's your superpower now. That's what you use to help others." The stars came out. Wisconsin stars that shine bright when you're far enough into city lights, when you're in a place where the darkness makes the light more precious, more necessary, more worth fighting for. The 3 of them stood together at the water's edge, watching the night arrive, comfortable in the silence, understanding that some moments didn't need words, just presence, just the knowledge that you weren't alone, that someone had shown up, was staying, would be there tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. That promises made to vulnerable children were sacred, unbreakable, worth fighting for no matter what it cost. 10 years later, Garrett Cole stood in the same park, watching another birthday party, another celebration, another gathering of bikers and families and people who'd chosen to show up. Tyler was 21 now, studying social work at University of Wisconsin, planning to become the kind of caseworker who actually listened, who actually cared, who actually protected children instead of protecting the system. He'd been part of Angels Watch for 3 years now, since he turned 18. One of their most effective advocates because he understood, because he lived it, because he could look a traumatized child in the eye and say, "I know," and mean it. The vest Garrett had given him that first night in the diner. Tyler had passed it on 2 years ago to a 13-year-old girl named Emma who'd been removed from an abusive home and was convinced nobody cared. Tyler had draped that vest over her shoulders and said the same words Garrett had said to him. "You're under protection now. You're not alone anymore." Emma was at the party today, 15 now, thriving, living with a good family, doing well in school. She'd passed the vest on last year to a 9-year-old boy who'd been rescued from a similar situation, who'd needed to know that someone would show up, that someone cared, that his suffering mattered. The vest had been passed on 7 times now. 7 children who'd been given the same gift Tyler received, the knowledge that they were seen, protected, worth fighting for. Angels Watch had expanded to 23 states, over 1,000 members. They'd assisted with thousands of cases, helped intervene hundreds of children, forced systematic reforms in foster care oversight, made it harder for predators like the Brooks to operate, made it more likely that suffering children would be believed. The system was better now. Not perfect, never perfect, but better. Because people had decided that comfort was less important than courage. That "not my problem" wasn't acceptable when children were suffering. That showing up mattered even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Garrett was 62 now, gray in his beard, lines around his eyes, his body showing the wear of 18 years riding motorcycles and 39 years taking care of people. But he'd never been happier, never felt more purposeful, never understood more clearly what his life had been for. He couldn't save Sophie. That grief would never fully heal. That loss would always hurt. But he'd saved Tyler. And Tyler had helped save Emma. And Emma had helped save others. And the ripple effect of one decision on one Christmas Eve had spread further than Garrett could track. One napkin, 2 words written in blood, one man who chose to see instead of looking away. That's all it took to change everything. Tyler appeared beside him, adult now, strong, confident, whole in ways that seemed impossible for someone who'd survived what he'd survived. "You know what I think about most," Tyler said. "Watching the kids play, watching the families gather, watching the community that had formed around the simple principle that children deserved protection. Not the basement, not the hunger, not the fear. I think about that moment in the diner when you knelt down and looked me in the eye and said, 'You're safe now.' That moment when I went from being invisible to being seen, when someone finally believed me, finally cared enough to do something." He turned to Garrett. "That's what I try to give every kid I work with. That moment, that belief, that proof that someone will show up, someone will fight, someone will care." "You've given that to a lot of kids," Garrett said. "More than you know, because every child you help, they help others. The gift keeps spreading. The promise keeps being kept." Tyler smiled. "The Brotherhood's promise, that's what we should call it. The commitment that we show up for vulnerable people, that we protect those who can't protect themselves, that we refuse to be bystanders when someone needs help." Garrett felt something settle in his chest, something that had been restless for 40 years, since he'd first seen combat, first held a dying soldier, first understood that life was fragile and evil was real, and the only thing that mattered was whether you showed up when it counted. "The Brotherhood's promise," Garrett repeated. "I like that." Around them, the party continued. Children laughing, adults talking, the comfortable chaos of family gatherings, the sound of healing, of survival, of people who'd decided that protecting the vulnerable was worth whatever it cost. Somewhere in Madison, a child was suffering, invisible, scared, convinced nobody cared, writing "help me" in ways that might never be seen. But somewhere else, 1,000 Angels Watch members were paying attention, watching, listening, ready to show up when that call came, ready to prove that the Brotherhood's promise was real, that it meant something, that it could be counted on. You're safe now, we're not going anywhere. You're under protection, not just words, a commitment, a code, a way of life. That's what Garrett Cole had learned on a Christmas Eve in a diner in Madison, Wisconsin, when a 10-year-old boy handed him a napkin with 2 words written in blood. And that's what he'd spent the rest of his life proving. Through action, through presence, through the simple radical act of showing up when it mattered. Sophie would have been proud. Tyler was alive. Hundreds of other children were safer. The system was better. The world was changed, not through grand gestures or brilliant strategy or institutional power. Through one decision, one moment, one choice to care when caring wasn't required, when caring was inconvenient, when caring cost everything. Garrett looked at Tyler, at the man he'd become, at the legacy he was building, at the promise he was keeping. "You did good, kid," Garrett said. "We did good," Tyler corrected. "All of us, together. That's what brotherhood means, not doing it alone, doing it together, showing up for each other, keeping the promise." The sun set over Lake Kagansa. Same park, same lake. 10 years later. Everything different. Everything changed by the decision to see instead of looking away, to believe instead of dismissing, to care when caring was hard. The Brotherhood's promise, simple, sacred, unbreakable. Show up, stay, protect, care. Not just for Tyler, for every child who writes "help me" in their own blood because speaking has become too dangerous. For every vulnerable person who needs someone to believe them, to fight for them, to prove that they matter. That was the promise. That was the legacy. That was what it meant to be part of something bigger than yourself. And Garrett Cole, standing in a park at sunset, surrounded by the family he'd chosen and who'd chosen him back, understood finally what his life had been for. Not just to survive Sophie's death, but to honor her life by saving others, by showing up, by keeping the promise, every single time, without exception, without hesitation. The Brotherhood's promise, kept, always.